Welcome back to the Mature Male Podcast. I'm your host, Wes, a psychotherapist helping men mature through timeless wisdom and practical guidance. Today's guest is Cesar Cardona. Cesar is a public speaker, educator, and developer of mindfulness whose journey from former gang member through a transformative physical assault incident led him to Buddhism and meditation. This path guided him to sobriety, healing from trauma, and learning how to mature as both a man and a human. Cesar, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Wes, thank you so much for having me. Hello to you listening.
Yes, very excited to chat today. So let's start with your story. It's truly remarkable, one of transformation from the gang involvement through that life-changing assault to finding mindfulness in the world of Buddhism. Could you walk us through that journey and how those experiences have shaped what it means to be a mature male?
Yeah, I sure can. So initially from the beginning, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. My parents met. To this day, I still wonder how they got along because one of them is a New Yorker, Spanish Republican male. The other is a Floridian, Black, Democratic female. And I have no recollection of them getting along whatsoever. Zero. What I do remember is a lot of violence, a lot of yelling, a lot of abandonment for me. Their respective families as well, both extended families were also aggressive people. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling, a lot of vindictive nature, a lot of ways of trying to show the other one up in whatever way you can. So either between violence and aggression and division or isolation, you find this child, this 4-year-old boy growing up. Now, of course, I took that with me and kind of walked the line of a who am I, where am I going mentality. Because my mom was from the streets. She grew up, her brothers were gang members, and she was in the streets and doing all this horrible stuff. And my father was a very clean cut, law abiding man. He was in the military, and I mean, oil and water, right? But at some capacity, I took both of those in. You know, he is a deeply intellectual man. My mother is a very street smart woman. And I got both of those. And I always think in my mind of like, and you could quote me if I'm wrong here, but the Romans, or not even, just the ancient soldiers the ancient governments would remove the soldiers and the artists from each other. They wouldn't have one do the other's job. Now imagine living your life with both of those in you, right? These two opposites of seeing the world differently. Between all that aggression, all that anger, and all that violence, by the time I got to being a teenager, I didn't know exactly what I needed to be. And one of the first places I found some sort of camaraderie was in a gang. I also had friends who weren't in the streets either. Jacksonville at that time was a very interesting dynamic. Like, you had skateboarders hanging out with gangbangers. It was very strange. Like, there was just no, whatever. But that put me in a space of aggression and anger. I did all the things that people do in a gang that are horrible, that you shouldn't do. But it's coming from a place of scared and fear and sadness and isolation. Now, of course, the front facing of it, the personality of it is anger, strength, power, desire to win, right? That's what it looked like on the outside. And like I say often, is personality, the root word is persona. That's Latin for mask. So that's the mask I was wearing at the time. But the consequences are still real. No matter what I told myself or made sense of why I should hurt this person, rob that person, sell this, sell that, put this in my body, shoot at these people, get shot at by these people. Whatever I told myself the reason why, the circumstances were still the same. Sometimes I think people who pass away too young is because before they can realize what they're doing, life just catches them. I was lucky enough, even though I was arrested, I was on probation for a while, and I was under a soft investigation from detectives for some other assaults that I may or may not committed. I was lucky enough to not spend any time in jail but a day. The probation I was on was wiped clean. Group of people that I spent time with, the gang members, they either went to jail, they went to prison, or they didn't make it, or they got religious. People who were always looking for me because of what I had done to them or their friends or whatever, they had bigger problems of their own. And little by little, I found myself being more isolated again. By this time, I was about 17, 18, and I realized, what is going on in this life? What am I doing to myself here? And I realized the external world was made by my actions. So I isolated again. And I completely just went back to nothing, back to zero. Didn't go out for a while, just try to find a new way of my life. And in time I did. Got a job, spent some time playing music, and then at some point I moved to Los Angeles. And that was one of the most freeing feelings of my life. Moving somewhere where I wasn't just raptured by these relics of what was done to me as a child and what I had done as a teenager. Fortunately, I didn't cause any trauma, but the trauma still came with me. And with that comes depression. And with that depression comes substance abuse, alcohol abuse, unhealthy promiscuity, just so many things. Now, the whole time, from the sense of being a male here, and I'm aware how long-winded I am, but there's just so many layers to this that I have to sometimes break it down, is the entire time I just kept seeing iterations of what a man was supposed to be. And I thought I was supposed to meet that. Show up, have the right answer, be right, be strong. If the person challenges you, you better win. If not, you better win the next time. You better take them intellectually, verbally, or physically. That's what it's supposed to be. That's who you are. That's what a man is. You provide all these things that I got told. And the tradition, the culture tells us that. Our generation before us tell us that. I don't blame them, but I can recognize the cause of it as well. But that started to eat away at me bit by bit. And then I was out somewhere at a place I didn't need to be. I didn't need to be around people that I didn't need to be around. And there was a woman who was in a bit of trouble. I went to go help her. And some of the men who were there that didn't like that, they jumped on me and assaulted me, knocked me out, shattered my face, my eye socket, my nose, front of my tongue was cut off, my bladder was punctured, just a ton of stuff. Now, some people would call that karma from what I did decades ago, a decade prior. Some people would just call that, no good deed goes unpunished. I'm indifferent, trying to find out what actually it was. Instead is, what can I learn from it? From there, I started evaluating every bit of my life, the internal and the external. And I started to find that the internal was causing the external. And who I thought I was supposed to be as a man was causing me nothing but anger, distrust, rage, if I may say it most. I walked myself into a Buddhist temple one day and I sat down to meditate. And then things started to open up a little for me. I started to realize the illusion of the thoughts I was giving myself. Fast forward to about 6, almost 7 years now, and I am a public speaker. I'm a man of peace. I am in the best place I've ever been in my life, and I feel more peaceful than ever.
Thank you for sharing your story. I know you've probably shared it many times, but I honor you. Every time someone shares it, I can tell how present they are to it is determined by the depth in which they share it. And I can just tell that you shared out of that depth. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, it sounds like after the assault was the big turn in your life. Did you reach a mini rock bottom, let's say, growing up at any point? Or would you say that was the delineating factor of when you really started making a change?
Yeah, tons of them, actually. There was a lot of signs there, and I just kept ignoring them, honestly. I had gotten into a horrible gang fight when I was in the teenage years, and my whole face got all beat up again. When I first moved here, I got into a bad physical. It was taking a substance that I should have been taking, and it ruined my kidneys. I had acute renal failure is what it was called. There's an observation there. There was the numerous amount of times of being in a relationship that just went sour and dramatic. Or most people were often, you could just break up and then, feel the pain of then and then move forward slowly. Instead, it was just this kind of vicious cycle of getting back together, breaking up, getting back together, breaking up. And it was just vicious and vicious and vicious. So the signs were there. I guess maybe they either weren't loud enough or I covered my ears well enough.
Yeah, well said. I think that's a common experience for any human. But I think specifically men, we can just be really not even stubborn. I think that's oversimplifying it. I just think, that self-awareness often just comes through hitting a rock bottom or a threshold. And I'm curious, you've shared several internalized messages you received about being a man. Does ethnicity come into this at all? Having two parents from different backgrounds, politics and gender as far as those messages? And if so, how would you correlate those?
Yeah, they did. Absolutely. And I want to preface by saying that first thing first, my parents are whole different people now. My mother and I, we get along fantastic. We talk every day. She plans on moving to Los Angeles soon. I adore her so much. My father, my biological father, he and I are amicable. We love each other very much. Our relationship isn't so friendly as my mom's is, but we see each other. If I go to Florida, it's loving. I love him. He loves me. And they become different people, as we should, right? That being said, a lot of my childhood was stop crying, be a man. You ain't a punk. Someone has a problem with you, you hit them, and you better win. There was a lot of do as I say, not as I do. There was a lot of this is the way life is. Life is tough. Life is unfair. There was a lot of making fun of me for having emotions. I would get mocked sometimes for having emotions by family members. Also, the race thing, the cultural thing for sure. One family member on my Spanish side held me down and would squeeze my nose and say, I'm going to make your nose pointy like a white person. So because my nose is too flat and round, because apparently that doesn't work in Spanish culture, at least in that Spanish culture. And then on my mother's side, they were gangsters. They were just tough. They didn't know any other way either. So I took that in. I took so much of that in. And that's the culture that we lived in for so long, didn't we? The industrial era, we bred the idea that the men go out to work and the women stay home. So the men had to be tough and weather the storm and the climate and the people. They had to be rigid and providing, and there was no emotions. Bit by bit, that just kept growing. This is why I don't blame my parents or my family members or anything. Trauma doesn't have a home. Trauma has no home whatsoever. It just keeps living from one person to the next.
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection. The last one on trauma's dynamism and how, yeah, you're right. It never gets stuck. It always gets perpetuated and passed on and internalized. Yeah, I think that's right. And I appreciate you shedding light on your experience growing up as a man. It's interesting. I mean, I'm a white man, so my experience is just different objectively, based on several factors. But I think there's this shared father wound that I think men across cultures, really westernized cultures, I think really sense, which is just whether or not your father was there, was he really there? And if he was even there, how did he show up in that space in a way that felt loving and connected and understanding and all that? And I find many men didn't have that. And to your point, a lot of it is generational. I mean, thank goodness now with mental health and awareness and changing the roles and understanding of what a man does, both in a partnership and as a parent, is changing for the better. But they didn't have those resources. And it sounds like you were like this too. What you grow up being told is love is normal is love and normal, even if it's effed up. It is what it is. And you can't blame people for seeing things like that. But it sounds like, and your parents were able to own up and transform for the better. We still all have a choice of if we stay there and our willingness to change.
Well said.
So thank you. So on that topic, within your story, you've mentioned there's kind of two main principles. And the first one I'd like to hear you unpack, if you're open to it, is there is power in vulnerability and openness. This can be a challenging concept for many men who've been conditioned to see vulnerability as weakness. How did you discover this power in your own life? Maybe any particular relationships or stories, experiences? And what would you say to men who are resistant to embracing vulnerability?
Yeah. I just got tired of always being upset inside. Just got tired of it. I would see it out in the world, and then at one point I asked myself, do I show signs of that at all? And if I did, then I need to investigate myself before I start judging somebody else. What's more is that if I didn't want to pick up the anger from my family, then why would I be angry at them for what they did to me? It's kind of a cosmic irony in that moment that you realize that. How do you yell at someone to stop yelling? Yeah. So yeah, it started with that. You watch the patterns of your actions. How did I get here? Am I the common denominator of all the drama that's happened in my life for the yelling? You got to take some sort of accountability for your own self to begin with. And that doesn't mean like you're at fault. It's just that's the accountability. What can I do within myself to make those adjustments? And it started with me. It started with me finding some place that I could cry on my own with a friend or a partner. Where can I do this and not feel shamed? Or where can I do this and feel comfortable enough to when that shame comes up, I can work through that as well. I mean that's the start of the action, right? The initial start was I'm tired of being upset. I'm tired of being grumpy. I'm tired of holding this stuff in. Any man who's listening right now, are you exhausted? Do you just naturally feel tired? And if I ask you what you're tired from, do you name an assortment of many things? And are those things external? My job, my family, my friends, my this, my that. Fair, totally understandable. They can exhaust your body. I'm talking about your mind. What are you holding on to that you could be letting go? What thought can you, for the first time in your life, maybe turn and just question it? Do I need to be this way still? Does this still bring the best version of me? Does this help me find peace in myself? Vulnerability for me was the way into that. It's hard It sounds really hard, and I'm going a long way about saying this, but the cracks is where the light comes through. So you got to break a little bit. You got to give yourself a break. Whether it's crying, whether it's saying words like I'm scared, whether it's saying I'm sad, you got to find some spot that you can just give yourself a bit of a push outside of that comfort zone. Question all the things that someone told you before. Not to find if they're wrong, but just to find how incomplete they are. Because that I can guarantee you. It's not incorrect, but it is incomplete. So vulnerability was my way in for that. Expressing things like scared, fear, nervous, saying I'm wrong. Those things are really important in this society.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's so helpful for a guy to know that it has to be private. It has to be personal. It has to be just with you. And how many of us aren't even comfortable just being with ourselves and allowing ourselves to feel all the things and to experience it, let those things come up. And really, I like what you said, not sit with them so you can either prove that they're right or wrong or even get beyond them, that whole fixing mentality, but to truly embrace them as a part of your story that's actively being experienced by you and having an effect and shaped you, and something you want to understand your relationship to it through. It sounds like you use curiosity and observation.
Yeah, curiosity is huge for me. I thank you for saying that because it's a part that slipped my mind. Very often, you can quote Ted Lasso, like, don't be judgmental, be curious, right? And it's the absolute when he said it, I did that. I'm gonna quote a movie with a TV show. I was DiCaprio in that meme where he's like pointing at the TV screen. I'm like, that's me. Just start asking questions. Just start asking questions. You don't even have to just start asking questions because it shifts you from being rigid and shutting down to being open and taking new information in. And if you want to succeed in the world, if you want to be the best version of yourself, you got to change because nature changes. That's evolution. That's just the way everything occurs in life. It changes over time. So it has to take new information in because that's what change is. New things happening. So your job is to be curious and ask those questions. And then you can amalgamate some of those things that are showing up for you. I personally feel like, and I'm speaking symbolically, that all the demons that live within us are just angels that feel unheard. And again, speaking symbolically, think about the times of like the story of Lucifer or Iblis or any of those angels that became demons, right? Whether it actually happened or not is a secondary conversation. I'm talking about the symbol of what it means. To suppress an angel in a certain capacity is to turn it into a demon that lives within you. So your job is to amalgamate with that, to, if I could use a Jungian phrase, to individualize with that, to bring that shadow to the light. If I can tell this really quick story, it's one of my favorite ones to tell because this is exactly what this means. The amalgamating of the other side of you that is fearful or maybe more control or scary or whatever. Abraham Lincoln, before he was president, he was an attorney, right? And before he was a known attorney, he was this dirt poor lawyer. He got signed on with another group to represent some case. And the person in charge of that legal team saw Lincoln walk up with his raggedy shoes and his short pants, even though he was tall and lanky and disheveled. And he was like, this guy can't be with us. He can't. And he got Lincoln kicked off the case. Instead of going home, Lincoln stayed there and watched the case, took notes. And then years later, when Lincoln became president, he went and made that man a part of his cabinet. There's your amalgamation. He took a part that was destructive, that kind of another person who had more power than him. And when he was in a space of power, he amalgamated with that individual. And that's the metaphor of what you can do with these fear, with these emotions. What is fear? What is fear? It is the gambling of your emotions for a situation that has not occurred yet. If it hasn't occurred yet, then what is fear then? It's something you're giving yourself. How do you listen to it and say, what are you actually telling me? Are you telling me to be more mindful of the work I'm about to do? Are you telling me to put my seatbelt on? Are you telling me to drive slower? Are you telling me that I'm living in a space that I could be hurt if I speak my truth? Just ask those questions. Those curious questions will help you amalgamate that. Thank you for letting me share that story. I just love that story so much.
Yeah, I do too. And there's humility in it that Lincoln, it seems like in the story, he didn't push back and say, no, you should let me do this. He just accepted his facts. He also didn't go to the suit store, go into debt and get a new suit, right? So, he could have done that, which in that way would have been bypassing accepting his circumstances and said, all I need to do is just change clothes for this guy and I'll do better, right? And he stayed, he took notes, he had the humility to know, maybe I'm not ready. But either way, this person who's in charge is telling me I'm not but it doesn't mean I'll stop learning. And I think that's a big thing guys let get in the way is, well, if I'm not there, if I can't be this, if I can't be that, and especially if you're in a heteronormative relationship, women often have this standard. And they often, in my work, come and say, hey, he's just not there, right? I feel like I have to train. It is kind of this funny, sad, and sort of true stereotype, right? That women train men to be in relationships, from emotional intelligence to communication to all that kind of stuff. It's all socialized, by the way. It's not like an actual role women are meant to play and men aren't. Anyways, all that being said, the point is that a man would not wait to get to a certain level or standard, but start where you are. Take the notes, be humble, go through the process. And it sounds like what you're saying also in that is your time will come. And when it does, how you express the power shows your integrity in that moment, how it's expressed to use to rule over someone and to manipulate or whatever it is, in some ways how he was treated, or to really say, I want to honor what this man carries and I want to invite him into a place in my life to give me wisdom and guidance. And it doesn't mean he stepped down from being president. He still fully was confident in that role. But yeah, I just appreciate that story. There's a lot of lessons in there.
It's great. It's fantastic. The guy was just killer with this sort of, like, you tell one story, you can split a million different ways of interpreting it. And beautifully said as well about those steps that, like, right where you are, it's good, and find the find the partner who wants to meet you right where you are.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with the curiosity component. The other part within that, I have this analogy that in self-awareness, we tend to use three different contexts. We either put ourselves in a courtroom, so we put ourselves on trial. We're really hard with ourselves. We're harsh. We're always needing to prove the facts and debate. We're either a beauty pageant. We love to show the best parts of ourselves and shake our little tail and try to get an award and say, look how great I am. And the third is my favorite, and it's the most integrated one. It's watching a ballet or observing art. You're appreciating something for what it is. There isn't this moral good or bad. You are just simply being present to the beauty that's unfolding in you and around you. And no one leaves an art show and can say objectively that was right or wrong. It was art, right? And how you interpret it is how you interpret it. Now, of course, there's a quality level to it, but yeah, that story just reminds me of that framework for curiosity. And I just appreciate you saying that because, it's something that as men, we have so deeply ingrained in ourselves the ability to be curious and imagine. We know this because as little boys, we do this. We're hugging, we're creating stories, we're creating roles and worlds and all these things, totally normal. And then somewhere along the way, someone said, nope, you need to grow up. You need to not cry. And it slowly dissolves that imagination from a boy. But it doesn't mean that's not in you. So guys, use the curiosity as really a mature version of your childhood imagination.
I 100% could not agree more. And I 100% will guarantee you listening that little boy is still living within you. I guarantee it. Rarely do I speak in absolutes, but these are one of those absolutes. That little boy is still there. Your job is to locate him, find him, and listen to him.
Yes. Yeah. One way to heal the father wound is to heal the boy that was wounded. And what does that look like? So, speaking of the power, the second principle in one of the many beautiful principles in your story is the power in being wrong and being open to change. So, in a culture that often rewards men for being right and having all the answers, I call it the sin of certainty. How do we help men see strength in admitting they don't know something or they need to change course?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in Florida, a couple of years after I got out of that gang and I isolated myself and I got off probation because I got a job to show my PO that I was doing well. And then somewhere in me, I realized, you know what? Actually, it's just safer with this sort of life. Why am I giving myself all these things? I worked a job for long enough, behaved myself. I was obviously depressed and going through these things, but externally, it looked better on paper in my life. By the time I was 20, I was able to buy my first house. Now, this is in 2010, so the market was prime for buying a house, right? I went to buy the house, got the inspection. I had to get insurance for the house. The insurance company told me that their quote for their coverage for flood insurance had to be raised higher than what they quoted me. Now, that's a different conversation, what insurances say or don't say, right? But the reason why they told me is because just a sliver in my property was a oak tree. And in hurricanes, oak trees topple over. They were so specific on it being an oak tree because it topples over. Why? Because oak trees are rigid. So when they're pushed, they have no give. Unlike palm trees, they move with the wind. Now, with that in mind, what is not being able to say I'm wrong? Is that rigid or is that flexible? Now, which one survives the toughest times now? The one who's rigid and says, no, I'm always right? Or the one who says, you know what? This is something that I can learn from. This is an area of adaptation for the best version of myself to show up for my partner, for my family, for my kids, for my job, for my friends, for my city, for my town, for my country, for humanity. Pick any one of those you want. Apply. Adaptation is one of nature's craftiest tricks. And the way to that adaptation is admitting fault, saying I am wrong. Now, that's a long way of speaking metaphorically about getting somewhere where you need to be. And there's also stats now that show things like, Carol Dweck's book on growth mindset that talks about 20 to 30% of people who look at challenge as opportunity instead of fixed mindset, saying that this is the way it is, they progress better in their school, in their job, in their, you name it. So if you want to make it a practical sense of gaining and advancing in your life, then you got to say, I'm wrong there too. Anywhere you go, you'll find more advantage by saying, oh, I'm wrong here. Let me know what's better. Because you are going to get better by listening to that. And then from a psychological standpoint and also a logical standpoint, you mean to tell me that of all society, you are the first person to finally be always right? Please. Tell me more why you think so. That's not how it works, man. Life is much more beautiful than that. And sometimes the beauty of the fault of the fall during autumn of the leaves that break away are just as gorgeous as the blossoming in the summer. So saying things like I'm wrong is an acknowledgement of loving your own self. It is an acknowledgement of loving your own mind, your thoughts, your actions, because you want them to grow and to be the best version. To be rigid and say, I'm always right. But when the storm comes, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's such a cool story that you're sharing that. I mean, who would have thought the home inspection would have brought that beautiful and deep, insightful analogy? Because it certainly came at a high price, my friend.
What came at a very high price. They weren't like, they didn't write it to me and said, by the way, use this for a metaphor 15 years later. They were just like, pay us your money, kid.
Right, exactly. It only paid dividends after. Yeah, no, I just appreciate it. And it's so true because I think what you're getting at there is that for those of us that think not admitting you're wrong is functional, you quickly see that it's not, that actually it creates the rigidity and dysfunction. And even though you feel in control and powerful and certain and good, that is just for a moment. Ultimately, what it's keeping you stuck, right? Because if you also can't admit you're wrong, then there's nothing to work on. And we know as humans, when we're given everything and everything is already, let's say, good enough, we kind of go into existential crisis. I mean, this is why you can't go on vacation every day, because life is somewhere in between, always being a hardship and being a grind and working towards something and, never having anything to work on. That's the first thing. But the second is you don't connect with people because it's an illusion to think you can have connection without an openness to being wrong. And in fact, we know psychologically that people become closer through either experiencing a wrongness together or out of an act of trust, admitting a wrongness to each other, though it's vulnerable. And of course, we've all gotten hurt. You might have shared that you're wrong and been made fun of, belittled, dismissed, overlooked, not trusted, all those things. But ultimately, what I hear in you sharing all that is that it's not just a preferential thing. I mean, even if it was, it would be worth doing. But it's an essential core part of who we are if we want to grow at all.
I would agree. It is absolutely essential if you want to grow. To not admit wrong is only pushing the problem down the line. You're kicking the can up the street. It is inevitably going to meet you at some capacity. Your job is to switch over the thought process and just get it done right then and there. And it will hurt. It's embarrassing. Don't get me wrong. Or get me wrong, I guess, in this case. It's super embarrassing, but it's short-term pain, long-term gain. Kind of what you're going to here, or the point you're making. and you feel from a psychological standpoint so unburdened. I spent years verbally trying to express how I'm right, physically trying to express how I'm, and just, in regular everyday life, finding new ways to reiterate how accurate and right I must be. Man, after I started saying I was wrong, it first off became a bit of an addiction. No, I messed up. No, it's me. Sorry. I'll totally sorry, dude. You listening in right now, try for once when someone honks at you in the street or in your car. If they look at you just one time, try my bad, my bad. It sounds like the scariest thing in the world because traffic is it's baked in with aggression. But then you feel amazing because the other side has been you driving home, you're more angry, you're thinking about it over and over again and blah blah blah. You get this psychological weight lifted off of you. And even with the emotions and your thoughts that are essentially materialists, you can't touch them, you feel weightless when you start removing those things from yourself. I can't express any other way. I'm a public speaker and I can't put to words how amazing you feel after you start going into the backlogs of things and saying, you know what, I was wrong about that. I'm wrong about this. That's my fault. I apologize. One last thing about it is that because we live in a society where no one wants to do that, it's a life hack. And no one, I'm not speaking in absolute here, but since it's not so common, it's a life hack. Because the moment you turn and say, you know what, you're right. I messed it up. My bad. I want to make this right. Everyone's like, oh, great. Okay, cool. They don't even know what to do with it. They have no clue what to do with it. But now you come across as the person who cares the most, which you should care the most because it's your life in this present moment right here and right now. It has almost nothing to do with the stuff that you were inherited from when you were a child. You are under no obligation to be the person you were yesterday, the day before, the month before, the week before, the year before. No one's holding you accountable for that except you. So give yourself that opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. It is so freeing. And I think there's this over seriousness and pressure we put on ourselves. And in a beautiful way, as Richard Rohr says, there was life before us, life goes beyond us during our time, and life will go beyond us. So there's no need for us to be the center of things, for us to be the hinge in which all success or failure swings, and the ultimate apex of what we would see as things working out or moving forward or not. We're certainly accountable for our role, and that's what you're getting at too. But just to take a deep breath and try to say I'm wrong, just don't take yourself so serious. Speaking of hacks, kind of a simple one that I've looked to is comedians. I used to over personalize everything and I could not take a joke, and that came from the culture I grew up in. But I started watching comedians and the way that they interacted and talked, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just feel like I can breathe. Someone's talking normal for once, they're not acting like they have it all together. They're self-deprecating, but in this weirdly empowering way. And I just love it so much, man. So I appreciate you saying that. And, going back to that really potent question you posed to men of being exhausted, that's it, man. You don't have to live so tired all the time and have it all together. So shifting gears a bit, to widen the conversation to general masculine traits, you've experienced both this destructive side of masculinity and gang culture and this healing potential of mindfulness and emotional maturity through finding Buddhism. So how do you see our culture's current struggles with defining healthy masculinity? You've certainly heard a myriad of definitions through your life and examples. And what does authentic masculinity and maturity look like to you?
What does authentic masculinity and maturity look like to me? Yeah. The current culture right now has I've said this multiple times. It's like, remember when we watched The Real World in the 90s? Remember they put all these different people in one building, one apartment, and they were from different walks of life. And then there was a lot of drama and a lot of friction and a lot of weird stuff going on. That's what we are now with social media. Social media is the house, and we are those characters. For the first time in human history, at least to our human record history, we have culture that are completely being thrown at each other, just blending over each other, all different ways of life. And I think somewhere right now in this society, we are trying to look for the answer. Spoiler alert. There is no the answer. This monk told me once, if you find someone who says, I found the way, run away.
I love that. I'm gonna
Isn't it
use
great?
that. That's
It's
so good.
fantastic. It's fantastic. That's not how it is. That's not there's a dynamism to every single thing. And I think that this current culture is trying to find something that is like to stick it. What is this? What is that? So in this case here, what is masculinity? Oh my God, there's toxic masculinity. We have to get rid of this toxic masculinity. And then the society who's watching the people have the conversation start to think that all masculinity is toxic. I'm sure some people have said that, but I don't get that from what people are saying overall. People are saying, hey, there's some fat on this meat that we can cut off. Someone's like, yeah, don't throw the whole steak out. No, we didn't say that. Didn't say that. Let's try to make sure we can, now that we are all mixed in this culture together, can we redefine? Can we carve out a little more? Can we shed a couple of things and grow a new few things about what masculinity is? To your second question, masculinity for me, what does it look like for me, is the person who recognizes their personal strengths, where they fit in the circle of their headspace, in the circle of their living space, in the circle of their community. Finding out the best version of yourself and then actualizing that into the world. So what does that look like? What do I mean by that? I'm a Buddhist. I also was a boxing trainer for 9 years. I'm a public speaker as well. So I have these traits of a calm strength and being able to project that outward. Okay, where can I put myself in the world to help? That requires me to be in tune with myself, not to take on what I think it's supposed to be. We saw where it went when I took on what I think it was supposed to be. And I would challenge any person listening. Who are you right now? And did you take it from somebody before you? Or are you looking at, what are my strengths? What are my flaws? How can I be as understanding of them as possible? And then use them out in the world. So for someone like me, to go back to an example, I am the person who always wants to, in a physical sense, in a very practical sense, I'm always the man who wants to help carry and help things. You need help carrying this? You need help with this? Whatever, whoever it is, I'm down. I don't care if it's a homeless person, a stranger, my neighbor, I'm down. People get offended, like, no, I can do this. Like, I know you can. I also want to help you. I also come across as I know myself enough. I come across as very charming. So it's easier for me to want to offer help than some 6'7" guy with tattoos on his forehead because society has deemed him as evil for some strange reason. But that's my tool. That's where I am. Then you have the set of that motorcycle club. And I use that purposely, that phrase, but they're a motorcycle club and they do things, but they also have what is it? They also have that organization of them where they protect women who are abused. And like they like park outside their house from there so their abuser can't come and attack the woman again. Like, that's a real level of protection. And they have found out what they do well, and they've used it to help themselves and the community, right? What's the poet? John O'Donohue. He was an amazing poet. He was a Catholic priest, then went into meditation in Buddhism for a little bit and started writing poetry. And he talks so beautiful. He passed away, but he was such a beautiful voice and so tender in his life. And people loved him because he brought peace to them with his words. Tell me, in this society, how that motorcycle club who learned their power to protect, and that poet who learned how to illuminate minds and feel bliss, how they can't coexist in this society. The current figure of a male for me is the person who understands who they are, what they do really well, and they can put it out in the world to make sure they help generate joy, peace, unity. The other side is division. We don't need any more of that. We have enough for that. The current male in this world is a person who wants to provide in a way that is sustainable to themselves. My partner, for example, is amazing with money. She handles all the money. Great. Fantastic. I don't need to and what's more is that, to go into the traditional masculine way about things, I'm way more organized than she is. So I organize all the stuff. Even at her place, I go to her apartment, I'll clean up the whole place, I'll organize it better than she ever could. Those are not traditional masculine roles, gender roles. Those are not traditional gender roles whatsoever, but I do them, and we are happier than ever. What's more is that she always feels safe with me because I'm a man who knows how to be secure in who I am as a person. I can 100% show any person how to box and defend themselves with my painted nails. I'm finding out how to be the best version of myself that can help myself and the rest of the world. That's what masculinity is. That's what it means to me. It's a little more heady than most people want to say, obviously, but I gotta say, we need to be a little more heady in the society right now. We got to be a little more about thinking about who we are, because everybody's acting on impulse right now, and that's a little more too animalistic for my taste. At this juncture, at some point we need it, but right now, not needed.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I appreciate you sharing from that perspective. I couldn't agree more. I think something else I took away is that you had the self-awareness as a person to also know what role models most resonate with you and to name them as such. Now, I don't know if you're connected or we're connected in the second case to the poet, but the point is that you can make the connection, that you don't have to have an actual relationship with that man who is modeling that virtue, that characteristic, that trait that you want. You can emulate it by watching them like Lincoln did that case and being able to say, why am I resonant with this poetry? What is it about the protection that feels so deeply inspiring and grounding and calm? Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And then also that it's varied. So not only is everyone in the room culturally together and those two men can exist, but in your own inner world, in your house, those two men can exist. You can look to the biker gang out to protect and the poet to learn beauty, and you can play both those roles. The question is always, and this is what you're getting at a minute ago and at the beginning, helping us reframe what personality is are you wearing the mask or not? Because until you drop the mask and you are vulnerable and open and you are willing to change, then what you're projecting is not who you are, which ultimately means you don't even have the ability to be a man. It's not until you lower it, come to terms with who you are. And then at that point, it seems like that's what you're saying. Living the authentic, healed, and integrated self in a generative and loving manner is what it means.
Absolutely. And it's waiting for each and every one of us men, by the way. And this is a second guarantee I'll make, is that that best version of yourself that you're waiting on is just behind, it's standing right behind the scariest thing about yourself you want to face. Promise. Promise you. And you can manage, you can take down, or you can see through that scariest thing. You can overcome it. Promise you. I promise you. I don't got to meet you to know it. I know it. And you have it in you already. Everything you and I are talking about here, Wes, is not giving any person something. We're just trying to remind them that they have it already. That's the beautiful part about all of this. I don't have anything to give you. All I can do is just show you a mirror and say, look a little different here. Because what you're holding in your back pocket actually has everything you need.
That's so well said. And I think that's a beautiful place to end and for guys to be reminded. As the saying goes, guru comes to you when you're ready. And in a sense, every guru's job is simply to, as you put it, so well remind you of who you are, to reflect that authentic self, and to continue to remind you until you live that person out day by day, moment by moment. I just want to have a deep bow of gratitude to you for expressing your authentic self, for bringing who you are as a man, as a person, as a beautiful soul to this conversation, offering so much at the baseline and contextually and experientially and specifically with everything that you've experienced and lived as a person, and wondering where people can find your work and what you're up to.
Yes. So the one-stop shop to go for me is my website, CesarCardona.com. There are newsletters that send out good news and ways that we can help each other in this society by voting with our dollars, helping companies that care about the world and us and society. I have a podcast as well called Beauty and the Break. It is a show of my partner and I, Foster Wilson. We host together stories of resilience during tough times. That website has all that information there. CesarCardona.com. And what's more is that I open my door, my virtual door, to any person who wants to have a conversation and dialogue about any topic matter whatsoever. I want to be there for you so I can help you find yourself.
Thank you for that generous offer, brother. I appreciate it. And we'll make sure to put all that in the show notes. And until next time.